Hi everyone. Is that working?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you see that at your end, guys?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. Is the sound okay? I'm getting a bit of feedback, but is that okay? Or...
It's not the best, but turned you down a little bit. Do you want to try again?
How's that?
Yeah, that's all right.
Can you just actually turn your mic off at your end, if that's okay? Anyway, I can get going and make do. Anyway, thank you very much for the invite, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I would have very much liked to get there and catch up with you all. And as to start off with, I've pulled bits and pieces together across a number of different projects, and you can see on the first slide there that there's a number of people that need acknowledgement, including Tim that's in the room there, and he's got a lot of his own personal experience with applying some of this technology, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer some of the questions that you might have that don't come out or don't get able to be answered during this presentation. Acknowledging Zoom doesn't fully replace being there in person. So the brief I was given was just provide an update and some on-the-ground experiences, I suppose, of applying technology to understand some production issues. And I thought that where we've been applying most of this technology was this issue of calf loss. And during this presentation, I thought I would just summarise a background of where we are with the calf loss issue, and basically giving you an insight of where we're heading in the future and how technology is playing a role in that. So again, just acknowledging Calf Watch project that Tim's leading on behalf of the Northern Territory Department. And then there's two other projects that are dealing with this calf loss issue, which is Calf 48 Hour, which is led by the Central Queensland Uni, which the NT is also involved in, and also this Cool Calves, or Reducing Calf Loss from Exposure, which is a project that I'm leading on the Barclay. So just to introduce the issue of calf loss, you know, this is probably teaching most of you guys to suck eggs, I suppose, but it's been difficult to investigate just because we are in extensive situations and carcasses are hard to find. So where they have done or put a lot of attention towards trying to identify the reasons why calf loss is occurring and putting technicians in the field, there's just a practical or logistical issue about finding these calves out in the paddock, and that's why we're now investigating how technology can assist us in this space by detecting calving events. So if you know, just providing a bit more detail around that, where they did do a full-on investigation and put a lot of attention in finding these carcasses and doing a post-mortem and the Barclay table and a Brunchilli, they were only able to get a definitive diagnosis on 50% of those cases. So where we're going with the technology space is, can we use some of these intravaginal calving alert devices to tell us when a cow's having a calf, for the pure purpose essentially of giving us a time of the event so that we can get a technician there and see how that calving is occurring, like as in, is it if we're able to get there quick enough, potentially observe some of the calving event, but more so the case is seeing if there's an alive calf on the ground, and if it's dead, getting a fresh post-mortem. So just to give, probably taking a step back a bit, and that is how big of an issue calf loss is. And just because I suppose I'm familiar with the cash cow, I'm drawing on some of the information that came out of that. Most of you would have heard of it, I'm sure, but just in summary, cash cow had about 80 properties across Northern Australia. We had mobs of, or generally two mobs on each property, between 150 to 300 head in each mob, and we monitored them for 3 to 4 years. So the results we got there were overall calf loss occurred about 12% of the time, so 12% loss between confirmed pregnancy to weaning overall. And you would have seen in that graph there, and you probably know that obviously we didn't have too many places around Alice Springs that were involved, or we didn't have any properties around Alice Springs that are involved. But if I was to have a guess, I would think that it's probably comparable to Northern Downs, and we would, if that is true, we'd probably be suggesting that between 10 to 15%, or 8 to 15% of pregnancies don't result in a calf. So if we were to extrapolate this as put a dollar figure on this across the Northern Australia beef herds, and sorry, if I take a step back there, on that table, you'll see these different figures, and what it's saying is within each of the regions, we've got 0, which is, you know, the leading, the station or property that had the lowest calf or rate of calf loss, and then the 25th is the first quartile. The second quartile, or the median, is the 50%. And what that means is that's the middle performance level for those properties in that region. And 75th is that's the 75th. So if there was 100 stations in that region, 75 of them would have had performances lower than that, and 25 higher, and 100 is the maximum there. So the 50th is the median or the typical performance, and we said that 25th for calf loss was an achievable level. So we'd say that, you know, 10 to 15 is probably a typical performance, and we'd probably say that 5 to 7 is an achievable level of performance for that region. So if we actually sort of do that sort of calculation and try and put a value on it, if we assume that for each of those regions that we did that from a medium loss to an achievable level of loss, and extrapolated that out over the whole breeding herd across Northern Australia, you know, it just put a value on calf loss across Northern Australia. It's a major impact. It actually calculates out to in the order of 120 million per year. So that's the background of why there is a lot of attention on calf loss at the moment. And to summarise what we know about calf loss, and where should we direct our attention moving forward. Here's some data out of the beef CRC where it was actually looking at what timing does calf loss occur, and we've got two figures here. The first one is in utero loss, so this is the losses over time during gestation. So we start off at 0, and then as a fetal loss occurs, it gradually moves up. So in this data set, it says that about 4% of fetal loss occurred in utero. And then the next figure over here, graph, is the cumulative losses that occurred after calving. So you can see here that there's about another 9.5% of loss after calving. So in total, there's about 13.5% loss in this herd. Sorry. So what we can see in this graph also is that the slope, so how quickly it rises, gives us an indication of the risk. So if it's rapidly going up, obviously there's more death occurring. So if we've got a relatively flat line, so say if this was flat here, it means that not many deaths are occurring. So if we take this across to this graph and look at this, what's our greatest risk period? You can see here that it's dramatically going up in the first few days after calving. So actually, if we've got 9.5% losses after birth, you can see that about 8% of those occur within, actually 6% of those occur within the first few days. So really the critical period of where most of this death occurring or calf loss is occurring in the first couple of days. So that brings us back to this topic of what technology can we deploy to really hone in on to this investigating what's happening around that time of birth and getting a few insights there. So obviously, what are the causes of calf death? What do we know now? And obviously there's two roles in this, and that is the cow has a role, but also the calf itself has a role. Now, when we think about the cow, to have a calf, we need to be thinking about the calving ease itself, how what's that birthing event like, and also the nutritional support that cow is able to provide. There's also another one there, and that's the behaviour of the cow, I suppose, and whether or not she's willing, able to provide or interested in providing the support to the calf. And obviously there's another one as well, and that's overlaid both of those things with management. From the cash cow project, we found that there was an association with mustering around the time of calving, for instance. So there's between 6 and 9% loss if someone mustered cows predicted to calve around that time. So from the milk factors, we know that age has a role there. Heifers don't supply as much milk as older cows. Breed has a role. Obviously, if an animal is sick, it's not able to provide as much as milk. But nutritional supply to a cow is critical for milk supply, and that can be quite specific to the first few days prior to calving, actually, as well as a few weeks prior to that, and also that as you'll see later on in this presentation, temperature. So if a cow does get too hot, she provides or directs her attention to a nutritional supply elsewhere or blood flow, and it has impacts on feed intake and different things as well. So when we think about calving ease, nutrition comes in as well. So nutrition has a role in both the fetal size and shape of the calf, but also the strength and ability of that cow to push it out, but also the growth of that cow up until that point. If we're talking about heifers and they aren't grown as well, the skeletal size or the pelvic area is probably compromised and more likely to have a calving dystocia problem. So if we were really to focus in on the calf side of things here, what are the main reasons that we suspect is causing calf death around the first couple of days? Dystocia can be also decreased vigor or vitality of the calf, which could be associated with a difficult calving birth, but it could be just the nutritional supply or the growth of that calf in utero. But one of the things as well that is probably critical and is associated with this is that calf strong enough and have enough vigor, I suppose, to get up, search for the udder, and have a drink and get that colostrum. I don't know if many people are aware, but the ability of a calf to absorb that colostrum or the immunoglobulins in that colostrum to provide their immunity, it's decreased within about six hours. So if a calf isn't able to get up and have a drink, their ability to actually develop some disease resistance actually decreases. So that's where we think that it's quite critical for strong calves to be born, so that they're able to get up and have that colostrum, which is essential. And then there's some other things there which also need to be acknowledged with the BCRC data, which comes back to the in utero support again of the nutrition. Birth weight and shape was known to be a risk factor, but the other one, of course, is which is other physical traits like teats, which basically a calf isn't able to drink, and dies of dehydration. So that's just a bit of a summary of where we're at, and now I'm sort of crossing over to some of the research that's occurring on this issue of calf loss that the NT is involved in, and highlighting some of the technology that we've deployed in association with that. So this reducing calf loss from exposure project is really just dealing with these open, relatively treeless plains in the Barkly region. How much in the cash cow project, we found an association with heifers, in particular calving in that area, and AACO were interested and supported this work. And that is, if we were to build some shade shelters in these paddocks, what impact does that have? And just to highlight here on this next slide, this is not a new issue, and we can go back to the literature, and this is one that I found in 1963, where they were planting apple pine and prickly acacia on the Barker tableland, trying to provide some kind of shade for cows and calves. And then most of you probably would have seen these old shade shelters for the calves that are still sort of around the Barkly, where these were built directly with the calves in mind, and built at a height to try and keep the cows out, but provide some shade for the calves. And for whatever reason, they're not really being maintained anymore. So the next is just to why is heat important? And basically, at the end of the day, heat's important when, like ourselves, if we get too hot, we don't really feel like eating too much. And so it's got a number of different roles here, but one of the main ones is that just feed intake goes down, and there are other associated factors with that. But also just cows getting rid of the heat, they actually direct their blood flow elsewhere. So blood flow that's usually directed towards the uterus or ovary for conceptions or providing nutritional support for the calf, that gets directed away from those internal organs to more focus on getting rid of some of that accumulated heat, body heat. So this next is just a video to introduce the site that we're working with at Avon Downs on the Barkly. So you can see there, this is some of the shade shelters that are now put at every water point in one of the trial paddocks at Avon Downs. And the study was comparing the performance of the cows grazing that paddock to a very similar paddock next door, where they didn't have these shade shelters. Now, just some of the preliminary results. This is the fetal and calf loss results for the last 2 years. And you can see there the green line at the bottom there is from 2019-20, and the yellow line is the calf loss for 2020-21 calving season. And overall, we're not seeing the results so far don't suggest an association with the provision of shade. So these are the rates in the shade paddock, and these are the ones in the no shade paddock. So you can see there's actually about a 10% decrease, or there was a 10% higher calf loss in the no shade paddock this year, but that wasn't statistically significant, and there was no statistical significance last year either. But one of the points I will draw out is these are incredibly, these are not atypical, but these are very high calf loss rates. So over the last 2 years across both paddocks, we've averaged between 30 and 40% calf loss in both of these paddocks. So when we're talking about heat and we're talking about milk supply, one of the outcomes that could be expressed in is weaning weight, the ability of a cow to provide the nutritional support to the calf. And so we've been monitoring weaning weight in these groups as well. And similarly, there's been no association with treatment group there. Last year, we did see about an 8 kilo increase in the weaning weight for the shaded paddock, but that wasn't significant, and we didn't get a repeated effect this year for that. And just also looking at the percentage of cows that are pregnant while lactating, these are first lactation Wagyu heifers, and so these are essentially, these heifers are getting 90% of them at least are getting back in calf within typically within about 4 months as first lactation, which is absolutely surprising and incredible. When I just thinking about Wagyus, I didn't realise how tough they were. They might be ugly, but they're definitely their reproductive performance is incredible. And probably if I hadn't recorded these results myself, I don't know if I'd naturally have believed them so much, but they really are remarkable in their ability to get back in calf. So where we're going with this project, so we haven't, in summary, we haven't really observed too much of a difference in performance from building these shade shelters, but this research has also allowed us a lot of opportunities to increase our knowledge about what's happening in this calf loss space. So one of the things where we're going in the future is deploying these calf alert systems and deploying GPS. So the calf alert system is to tell us the time of the calving event. And also the location of the calving event, so that we can then extract from that information what is the impact of distance to water at calving, and also what's the impact of the time. What's the likelihood of a calf dying if it was born in the morning versus have a birth in the afternoon, so to speak. And here's another little short clip of deploying some of this technology. So where we're going with this, so you would have seen there that there's some GPS collars around these cows, which I alluded to before. And obviously that we're deploying those to link to the time of, to tell us the location of the calving event. But they also offer us a number of other insights in what happens with the cow. So, we've got GPS that are, we've got 3 different schedules on these GPS. And when I say a schedule, that's their configuration, I suppose. And these GPS units are configured to either give us a location every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes. So every cow has a GPS unit strapped to her, and we've got 1/3 of the group at each of those frequencies. So the types of information we can extract from this GPS is the social interaction stuff. So who their mates are. When you've got the whole mob configured with, when we've got a GPS unit on all the individuals within a mob, we can work out who their mates are essentially, and what group they hang out with. But if we can go back to the literature as well, and this is something that probably could be done in the future, is they were able to predict with a relatively degree of association who the sire of the calves were with when they paired up bulls to cows. So what cows that spent most time with the bull was also associated with who the sire of that progeny was, resulting progeny. But what we're particularly interested in is changes in cow behaviour at the time of calving. So what we're seeing is cows have their own little group or mates that they hang out with prior to calving, and that at the time of calving that actually changes. So probably a bit like humans, I suppose, is once they have a calf, they start hanging out with the other cows that also have a calf, and they have the creche groups and things like that. So there is actually a social structure change associated with calving. But this is a picture of all the GPS locations we've got from the paddocks that we're monitoring. There's actually 4.2 million GPS locations that we've captured last year alone, and we'll be probably doing the same or more moving forward. So what we can tell from this information is how individual cows are using that paddock. So on an individual daily basis, how far they walk. And we can also, to some degree, using literature, which probably does need to be validated a little bit in the north, is you can start classifying behaviours of cows based on the speed that they're moving. And this is the benefit of having GPS data at a relatively collected relatively frequently, because you can, getting more and more information, you can start building more and more of a story about how they're using the paddock. So it's really quite interesting there. You can see that over a whole year that they've actually haven't used, so these clear spots here, they haven't actually used any of that country too much at all. And you can, the blue dots are the water points, and these yellow dots are actually our towers that we're using to get this information out of the paddock. But again, we can start using this GPS information to start calculating how much time they spend at a water point or distance away for different distances away from water. And we can sort of overlay this. These paddocks themselves are largely all made up of the one land type, but when we get into paddocks with different land types, we can actually start looking at the utilisation for different land types. So just to also, in this paddock, we've also captured some dingoes, and that's actually a cirrus tag on a collar on a dingo. So there's actually, Ben Allen from University of Southern Queensland has helped us do this, and we're also just getting a little bit of data on how the dogs are interacting with these mobs. And we're not dictating any changes on management here. They can still bait and do whatever their normal predation sort of management is, and we'll actually know how effective baiting is, or how many dogs die from the data as well, and we can go back and capture that collar and redeploy it. But what was interesting, or just to highlight some of the initial results that we've got out, is that after capturing one of these dogs, within 3 days, that dog was 150 kilometres away. I don't know, it just kept on going north after. So I didn't really like its experience of being captured, I'd say. Just to highlight some of the other projects that are similar, I suppose, and deploying some of this tech, it's very comparable to what I sort of outlined. I spent some time outlining. Is that with Paddock Power, we're looking at grazing behaviour in how they're using paddocks of different infrastructure, and we're using that information to provide some evidence around how to get better bang for buck for their development moving forward. I'll skip ahead there, and just to finish off on a last project which we're working on right now, and that is the U-cycle, and this is a little bit futuristic, and I suppose, and it's probably seeing what we can do with some of this technology. So as we've sort of outlined in this presentation, we've got technology available looking at calving events, the detecting of a calving event, but what we haven't, one of the things that we still rely on is observation to work out if there was a successful calving event or not. And one of the theories was if we can actually remotely detect a cow being suckled as a positive outcome. So we were doing this work in association with the University of Queensland NT department and CSIRO. And you can see here that this is one of the cars that's all kitted up. This is a Cirrus tag, and some of you would be familiar with the Cirrus tag. And that tag is only able to generate the data, but it doesn't have any storage capacity on it. So we're putting a little halter in this device here, so that the device is the data from this device is being captured on the other storage bank on the calf. Now the cow also has a collar on them, and what we're doing is making a lot of this. These are the collars on the cows, and what we're doing is we're taking a lot of observations of the suckling events, and we're developing an algorithm for the suckling on the calf, and then training the algorithm on, or investigating if we can detect different maternal behaviours associated with suckling on the cow to give us some kind of indication of or positive outcome for a calf being born and have us been observed, detected as suckling as a positive welfare outcome or well-being outcome. So if we've got two bits of information, we've got a piece of information saying that we've got an alert for a calving event, and if we've got a couple of hours later we still haven't got a suckling event, that might be a cue for going to investigate further. So that work is ongoing right now, and moving forward we'll be hopefully we'll definitely be providing updates of how successful doing that. So I might just leave that there and wrap it up, Sally, and open up for any questions, I suppose.
Thanks, Kieren. I appreciate that. Any questions from the group? I think you've wowed everyone, Kieren, with that. Look, Kieren, we might, if it's all right, share your contact details. So if any of the group have got any follow-up questions, they can get in touch with you.
No worries. All right. Apologies that Zoom and all the rest of it's probably not always the best way to deliver some of these presentations, but very willing to be contacted by anyone and talking about anything later on.
Thanks so much. Please join me in thanking Kieren.